The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Deadwood Creek as Sarah Crowfeather walked toward the general store, her moccasined feet silent against the weathered planks of the boardwalk. The town had awakened with its usual cacophony of hammering, shouting, and the distant lowing of cattle, but something felt different today, a tension that hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Sarah pulled her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders, acutely aware of the stares that followed her movement. As one of the few Lakota who dared venture into the white settlement, she had grown accustomed to the whispers and sideways glances. But today, they seemed sharper, more malevolent. She had come to trade the beadwork her grandmother had taught her to make, intricate patterns that told stories of her people, each stitch a prayer, each color a memory. The coins she earned helped feed her younger brother since their father had been killed in the cavalry raids 2 winters past. Well, look what the wind blew in, came a gravelly voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Buck Morrison and his gang of drifters emerging from the saloon, their eyes already glazed with morning whiskey. Morrison was a large man with cruel eyes and hands that had never known honest work. His companions, Jake Wheeler, Tom Briggs, and the weasel-faced Clem Hartley, flanked him like hungry wolves. "Ain't you a pretty little savage?" Morrison sneered, stepping closer. The stench of alcohol and unwashed flesh made Sarah's stomach turn. "What brings you to civilized folks' territory?" "I come to trade," Sarah replied quietly, her English careful and precise. She had learned the white man's tongue from the missionary school before her father pulled her away, sensing the danger in their teachings. "Trade?" Morrison laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "What could a dirty Indian possibly have that we'd want?" Sarah held up her beadwork, a medicine bag decorated with thunderbirds and sacred symbols. The morning light caught the blues and whites, making them shimmer like captured sky. "Pretty trinkets," Wheeler spat. "But I reckon we can find better uses for you than selling baubles." Before Sarah could react, Morrison grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. The beadwork scattered to the ground, precious hours of work trampled under his boots. "How about you show us some of that Indian hospitality we heard so much about?" "Let me go," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her throat. "I don't think so, squaw." Morrison's free hand reached for her shawl. "Time you learned?" "Your place." A crowd had begun to gather. Shopkeepers, cowboys, even women with their children, but no one moved to help. They watched with the morbid fascination of spectators at a hanging, some with disgust, others with barely concealed excitement. Morrison yanked the shawl away, exposing Sarah's simple dress beneath. "Look here, boys. See how the savage dresses, up like a real woman?" Laughter rippled through the crowd as Sarah struggled against his grip. Her face burned with shame and rage, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "Please," she whispered, hating herself for the word even as it left her lips. "Please what?" Morrison's voice was thick with malice. "Please. What, you red-skinned?" The crack of a rifle shot split the morning air like thunder, and Morrison's hat flew from his head. A neat hole punched through its crown. The crowd scattered like startled birds as a lone horseman emerged from the morning mist, his Winchester still smoking in his hands. The rider's face was hidden beneath the shadow of his hat brim, but Sarah could see the set of his jaw, hard as granite, and the way his horse danced beneath him, eager for violence. "That's enough," came a voice like winter wind across the prairie. The horseman sat motionless for a long moment, letting the weight of his presence settle over the crowd like a shroud. When he finally dismounted, his movements were fluid and deliberate, each step measured and purposeful. The spurs on his boots chimed softly against the wooden planks as he approached the frozen tableau in the town square. "I said that's enough, Morrison." Buck Morrison's face went pale as recognition dawned. "Well, I'll be damned, if it ain't the great Daniel Blackwood back from the dead." Daniel pushed back his hat, revealing a face carved by wind and hardship, marked by a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from his last encounter with Morrison's kind. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, fixed on the man still gripping Sarah's wrist. "Let her go." "Now why would I do that?" Morrison's bravado was returning, bolstered by the presence of his men. "This here's between me and the squaw. Ain't none of your concern, Blackwood." Daniel's hand moved to rest on the grip of his Colt .45, the gesture casual but unmistakable. "Everything that happens in this town is my concern. I own half of it, remember?" The crowd murmured at this reminder. Daniel Blackwood had been one of the most successful ranchers in the territory before he disappeared 3 years ago, leaving behind rumors and speculation. Some said he'd gone east to settle his father's estate. Others whispered darker tales of revenge and blood feuds. Now he stood before them like a ghost made flesh, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath. "You been gone a long time, Blackwood," Wheeler interjected, his hand hovering near his gun. "Things change. Maybe this town don't need your kind of order no more." Daniel's smile was cold as winter moonlight. "My kind of order? You mean the kind where women, any women, can walk these streets without being molested by drunken cowards?" Morrison's grip tightened on Sarah's wrist, making her wince. "This ain't no woman. This is just another dirty Indian, and if you can't see that—" The words died in his throat as Daniel's Colt appeared in his hand with lightning speed. The barrel pressed against Morrison's forehead before anyone could blink. "Finish that sentence," Daniel whispered, his voice deadly quiet. "I dare you." The square had gone silent except for the sound of Sarah's rapid breathing and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Morrison's eyes crossed as he stared down, the barrel of the gun, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Now," Daniel continued, his voice conversational, "you're going to let the lady go. You're going to apologize for your behavior, and then you and your boys are going to ride out of my town and never come back." "Your town?" Briggs spoke up from behind Morrison, his voice shaking. "You can't what?" Daniel's eyes never left Morrison's face. "Can't protect decent folks from scum like you? Can't enforce the law when the sheriff's too drunk or too scared to do his job?" Sheriff Hawkins, a portly man with a badge that had lost its shine years ago, pushed through the crowd. "Now see here, Blackwood. You can't just come back and start throwing your weight around. There's proper procedures." "Procedures?" Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Where were your procedures when this woman was being assaulted? In broad daylight. Where was the law then, Sheriff?" Hawkins' face reddened, but he said nothing. Everyone in town knew he was Morrison's creature, bought and paid for with whiskey and coin. Daniel pressed the gun harder against Morrison's skull. "I'm waiting for that apology." Morrison's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before he managed to croak out, "Sorry, ma'am, didn't mean no disrespect." "Louder," Daniel commanded, "so everyone can hear." "I'm sorry," Morrison shouted, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry for what I done." Daniel stepped back, holstering his weapon in one smooth motion. Morrison released Sarah's wrist and stumbled backward, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. "Now get out," Daniel said quietly. "All of you. And if I see you in this territory again, I won't be so merciful." Morrison and his men backed toward their horses, their hands carefully away from their weapons. As they mounted up, Morrison turned back, his eyes burning with hatred. "This ain't over, Blackwood, not by a long shot." "Yes," Daniel replied, his hand resting casually on his gun butt. "It is." As the dust settled from Morrison's hasty departure, the crowd began to disperse, their excited whispers following them like autumn leaves in the wind. Daniel knelt to gather Sarah's scattered beadwork, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he examined each piece. "Beautiful work," he said, rising to offer them to her. "My grandmother would have appreciated the craftsmanship." Sarah studied, his face searching for mockery or condescension, but found only genuine respect. "Your grandmother?" "Mary Singing Bird. My mother's mother." Daniel's voice carried a weight of old grief. "She taught me that courage comes in many forms, and that true strength lies in protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had heard whispers of the half-breed rancher who had disappeared years ago, but seeing him now, the sharp cheekbones, the way he held himself, the reverence with which he spoke of his Lakota grandmother, She understood why Morrison's words had cut so deep. "You're," she began. "Half Lakota, half Irish," Daniel confirmed. "Though most folks prefer to forget that part of my heritage when my cattle bring money to their town." Sarah accepted her beadwork, their fingers brushing briefly. "Why did you help me?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "Because 3 years ago I stood in this same square and watched them do worse to someone I loved. And I did nothing." The pain in his voice was raw, unhealed. Sarah felt her heart constrict with understanding. "What happened?" "Her name was Little Dove. She was going to be my wife." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Morrison and his boys caught her alone one evening. By the time I found her..." He stopped, unable to continue. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I left that night. Couldn't bear to stay. Couldn't bear to see this place that had taken everything from me. Spent 3 years in the East, learning to be the kind of man my father wanted. Civilized, educated, respectable." His laugh was bitter. "But you can't wash the prairie out of your blood, can you?" Sarah shook her head. "No, you cannot. I came back because I heard Morrison had returned, heard he was terrorizing the Lakota settlements, taking what he wanted, hurting who he pleased. I couldn't let it continue. And now..." Daniel looked toward the horizon where Morrison's dust cloud was still visible. "Now I finish what I should have finished 3 years ago." "He will not go quietly," Sarah warned. "Men like him, they fester like infected wounds. They gather others like themselves." "I know." Daniel's hand moved unconsciously to his scar. "That's why I need to ask you something. Your people, are they safe? Do they have somewhere to go if trouble comes?" Sarah considered the question carefully. Her band lived in a hidden valley 2 days' ride north, but they were few in number. Mostly women, children, and old men. The warriors had been killed or driven away by the cavalry raids. "We have a place," she said finally. "But if Morrison brings many men..." "He will." Daniel's voice was certain. "Men like him don't forget humiliation. He'll be back with reinforcements, probably within the week." "Then what do you propose?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, his mind working through possibilities. "There's an old mine shaft in the hills east of here. Abandoned silver mine, but the tunnels run deep. It could shelter your people if needed." "And you?" "I'll be here. This is my town, my responsibility. I won't run again." Sarah studied his face, seeing the determination there, but also the weight of old guilt and new purpose. "You cannot face them alone." "I won't be alone." Daniel's smile was grim. "There are still good men in this town, men who remember what it was like before Morrison's kind took over. They just need someone to remind them how to stand up." As if summoned by his words, a figure approached from across the square. Thomas McKenna, the blacksmith, was a giant of a man with arms like tree trunks and a reputation for fairness that even Morrison had respected. "Daniel Blackwood," McKenna said, extending a massive hand. "Heard you were back." "Tom." Daniel clasped the offered hand. "Good to see you. Heard what happened here too. About time someone stood up to that bastard. Morrison." McKenna's eyes flicked to Sarah and he touched his hat respectfully. "Ma'am, sorry you had to endure that." "There will be more trouble," Daniel warned. "Morrison won't let this stand." McKenna's smile was fierce. "Then we'd better get ready for him, hadn't we?" As the two men began to discuss preparations, Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. She could sense the storm gathering on the horizon, could feel the weight of destiny settling over them all like a shroud. The blood that had been spilled here years ago was calling for more blood, and she feared that before this was over, the prairie would drink deep of it. The attack came at dawn on the seventh day, just as Daniel had predicted. Sarah watched from the bell tower of the old church as Morrison's enlarged force crested the hill overlooking Deadwood Creek. 23 men, she counted, their weapons glinting in the early morning light like the fangs of some great beast. Below, in the town, Daniel's preparations had transformed the sleepy settlement into a fortress. Barricades blocked the main street. Sharpshooters waited in second-story windows, and the townspeople who had chosen to stay crouched behind whatever cover they could find. Those who had fled, mostly the cowards and Morrison's sympathizers, had left in the night, taking their shame with them. "They're coming," Sarah called down to Daniel, who stood in the street below, his rifle cradled in his arms like a prayer. Daniel nodded grimly. He had spent the week gathering allies: McKenna the blacksmith, Doc Holliday's cousin James, old Pete Garrison, who had fought in the war, and a dozen other men who remembered what honor meant. It wasn't enough, not against Morrison's numbers, but it would have to do. "Remember," Daniel called to his men, "we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for the idea that decent folks can live in peace, that women can walk our streets without fear, that strength serves justice, not cruelty." The thunder of hoofbeats grew louder as Morrison's riders approached. Sarah could see Morrison himself at their head, his face twisted with rage and anticipation. Beside him rode Jake Wheeler and Tom Briggs, along with faces she didn't recognize, hired, guns and drifters drawn by the promise of easy plunder. "Blackwood," Morrison's voice echoed across the empty street. "Come out and face me like a man." Daniel stepped into the open, his hands loose at his sides. "I'm here, Morrison, just like I promised." "You humiliated me in front of the whole town," Morrison snarled. "Made me look weak. That's a debt that needs paying. The only debt here is the one you owe to every decent person you've terrorized," Daniel replied. "To Little Dove. To this woman here." He gestured towards Sarah in the bell tower. "To everyone who suffered because of your cruelty." Morrison's laugh was ugly. "Little Dove, that Indian whore got what she deserved. Just like this one will when I'm done with you." The words hit Daniel like physical blows, and Sarah saw his hand move toward his gun. But Morrison was ready for it, his own weapon already half drawn. "Now," Daniel shouted. The street exploded into violence. Gunfire erupted from windows and doorways as Daniel's men opened up on Morrison's riders. Horses screamed and reared, men shouted and cursed, and the acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. Daniel's first shot took Morrison in the shoulder, spinning him from his saddle. But the outlaw leader was tough as leather, rolling behind a water trough and returning fire. His bullet splintered the wood inches from Daniel's head. From her perch in the bell tower, Sarah watched the battle unfold with growing horror. McKenna had taken position behind his forge, his massive rifle booming like thunder as he picked off riders with methodical precision. Doc Holliday's cousin James moved like a ghost between buildings, his twin pistols spitting death. But Morrison's men were experienced killers, and they gave as good as they got. Old Pete Garrison fell with a bullet in his chest, his rifle clattering to the ground. One of the younger townsmen, barely more than a boy, screamed as Wheeler's shot shattered his arm. The tide of battle seemed to be turning against them. Then Sarah saw Morrison break cover, moving toward the church with murder in his eyes. He had spotted her in the tower and meant to use her as leverage against Daniel. She fumbled for the rifle Daniel had given her, her hands shaking as she tried to sight down the barrel. "Come down here, you red-skinned bitch," Morrison shouted as he kicked in the church door. "Time to finish what we started." Sarah heard his boots on the wooden stairs coming closer. She steadied the rifle against the window frame, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory. "Courage, little one. The spirits of our ancestors watch over those who fight for justice." Morrison's head appeared at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of rage and blood. "There you are," he snarled, raising his gun. Sarah pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the bell tower like the voice of God himself. Morrison's eyes widened in surprise, then went blank as he toppled backward, down the stairs, his gun unfired. Below in the street, the sound of Sarah's rifle seemed to break the spell of violence. Morrison's remaining men, seeing their leader fall, began to waver. Daniel seized the moment, stepping into the open with his Colt blazing. "It's over," he shouted. "Morrison's dead. Throw down your weapons." One by one, the surviving outlaws raised their hands in surrender. The battle for Deadwood Creek was finished. As the sun climbed higher, painting the blood-soaked street in shades of gold and crimson, Daniel climbed the bell tower to find Sarah. She sat with her back against the wall, the rifle across her knees, tears streaming down her face. "It's done," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Yes," she whispered. "It's done." Together, they looked out over the town. Their town now, bought with blood and courage. In the distance, Sarah could see riders approaching from the north, her people coming to see if the danger had passed. "What happens now?" she asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the horizon. "Now we build something better, something worth the price we paid for it." As the morning sun climbed higher into the endless prairie sky, Sarah Crowfeather and Daniel Blackwood stood together in the bell tower, two souls bound by shared struggle and the promise of a new dawn. The blood on the prairie had been answered at last, and from its sacrifice something clean and strong would grow. The frontier had claimed its due, but it had also revealed its promise, that courage and justice, when they stood together, could triumph over even the darkest of human hearts.